Guys, welcome to today's call. It's a pleasure to see you all again. To those who's joined from previous webinars, welcome back, and to those who's new, welcome. It's really good to see you in the call today. We hope you enjoy this session. Today's session is going to be all around the topic of artificial intelligence, cyber essentials, and cyber resiliency. In today's call, I have a special guest with us. Pleasure to introduce him, actually. His name is Simon Newman. He's the COO of the London Cyber Resiliency Centre. Definitely somewhere after this call I would encourage you to check out, especially if you are going through Cyber Essentials or looking into that accreditation. This organisation is all about assisting SMEs in gaining that accreditation and being as secure as they can be when operating online. Their main goal is to make London and the UK the safest city and country in the world to do online business in. So without further ado, it's a pleasure to hand you over to Simon. So Simon, welcome. How are you?
Thank you, Jamie. Wow, it was an introduction. Yes, very well indeed.
Good to hear. So no, thank you ever so much for joining us on the call today. We wanted to bring you in as an expert in the cyber resiliency realm, the cybersecurity realm, because there's a lot of different areas and avenues to explore. You know, touching from the most basic of cyber resiliency with antivirus, which a lot of us, hopefully, we all have on our workstation, all the way through to back end infrastructure and kind of how that will protect businesses and actually amending processes to do that as well. So I wanted to bring you into the call today to really get an insider's account on what is happening in the business world around cyber resiliency, how you guys can actually help protect businesses against the bad actors controlling artificial intelligence as well. So obviously we've touched on some of the good things that AI can do in past webinars and past calls, but we've also touched on some of the negative things that can happen when it falls into the hands of bad actors. So I wanted to bring you in today as an expert in the field and tell us on how CES and CES Plus can help protect our businesses from online threats.
Brilliant. Well, thank you, Jamie. And I'll perhaps start off just by setting the scene in terms of kind of what's happening at the moment perhaps on a national level in relation to the cyber threat. So obviously cyber is considered as one of the top 5 threats that the UK faces, which I think has been there now for a number of years. The government published its cyber breaches survey recently, which is a really good overview of the threats that face both businesses and charities across England and Wales. And there's some really interesting statistics that are coming out of that. So it's a free report you can download on the government website called Cyber Breaches. The key headline is that around about 1/3 of businesses have suffered at least one cyber attack or breach in the past 12 months. Now, interestingly, this is down from 39% last year. So on the one hand, you might look at that and go, well, that's really good. It looks like people are starting to get the message. Perhaps we're becoming more resilient to cyber attacks. People are putting things in place. They're listening to the messaging. But what the report says, and I think this is really interesting, is that they feel businesses are now less able to spot cyber attacks or breaches than they have been previously. And that's a really worrying trend for us. So they're saying that basic cyber hygiene has got worse. So this is an interesting fact that's coming out from what government are saying at a public level. And there's a couple other things there which are really interesting as well. So one of the things that we often recommend to people, so something that every organisation should be doing regularly, is carrying out security awareness training. So just educating staff on what the type of risks that are out there at the moment, how to spot them and what to do. 1 in 5 businesses do any form of security awareness training, which is shocking. It's one of the easiest and simplest things you can do. There's loads of resources out there produced by government and others, and yet only 1 in 5 businesses actually do something about it. So that's some really interesting stuff that's coming out of that. And the other thing as well, just in terms of the threat landscape, phishing is still the most common and it's the most disruptive type of attack that's happening. It's very effective, which is why criminals continue to use it. And we're finding as well that it's not necessarily smaller businesses that potentially are being targeted directly by criminals. It's often the fact they're part of supply chains, they're caught up as a result of that and are affected. So it's some interesting things that are coming out from a national picture, but the worrying overarching message on that is that we seem to be getting worse at doing the basics, and that is certainly causing concern across government and policing on how to tackle that threat.
So on that kind of fact that we're doing worse as a country now in terms of businesses being more cyber resilient, could you say that the turmoil of coronavirus could have maybe had some impact on that as well? Yeah. Because businesses had to evolve. I mean, you know, we some companies undertook 10 years worth of digital transformation in a couple of months to survive, and where them changes come in with such fast pace. Was cyber resiliency forgotten about at that stage, just to be agile and evolve to stay afloat and survive rather than thrive?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Jamie. I mean, if you look at businesses in the UK, we've got 5.5 million businesses, of which 99% of those are SMEs. So that's smaller than 249 members of staff. And in fact, if you look at that figure in more detail, something like 80% actually have fewer than 9 staff. So we are a country that has a real, very significant number of micro businesses. You're absolutely right. It's not just about coronavirus, the significant impact that's had on businesses following lockdowns, etc. But also we're in a cost of living crisis as well. We've seen energy prices go through the roof. Inflation's very high. We've also got, Darren mentioned, the Brexit word as well, which is potentially making things more difficult from a trading perspective. All of those things have meant that businesses quite rightly have focused on staying alive as opposed to looking at other issues. And as a result of that, cybersecurity, cyber resilience has understandably dropped down the list of priorities. And again, going back to the cyber breaches survey, what they're saying is that fewer directors are now have specific responsibility for cyber within an organisation, and again, it confirms that it has dropped as a priority for lots of organisations. So that is a worrying thing, and typically it only becomes a priority, as we were mentioning beforehand, sadly, when someone does become a victim, by which point, unfortunately, it's often too late.
Definitely. And obviously one of the most common attack vectors, as we mentioned a few moments ago, is phishing attacks. And one of the things I wanted to discuss with you on today's call is artificial intelligence and kind of what CRC advise and what you guys can do to help businesses protect against AI. Now, I'm a massive fan of AI, Simon, and obviously you're working in technology space. I can imagine you are as well. Yeah. But then falling into the hands of bad actors, and I showed it in a couple of demonstrations ago. You can reverse psychologize, for example, ChatGPT to give you or write you a phishing email or example of a phishing email. And this tool is that powerful that it can imitate your business owner. It can imitate famous people. How would the CRC or some initiatives that you run help protect businesses from kind of them sort of threats online?
Yeah, so it's a good question, and you're right. I mean, I'm really excited by what AI can potentially deliver. It's a really exciting opportunity out there for the future. But you're right, criminals also look at it as a way of committing a crime on a much bigger scale, and we're already seeing cases where that's being used. And you gave a really good example a moment ago. The advice we generally give, to businesses is that security awareness training, staff training, is really critical in helping to identify potential emails, and it's that human nature which is still really important. If you look at something that looks suspicious, then take a few moments to read it through, and it's always best to challenge and question rather than simply clicking on those links. So the normal rules around phishing, I think, still apply in that regard. There's obviously technology that's out there that is looking to try and spot some AI generated attacks, which will grow and develop, but of course it's a constant chase game. Criminals will then up their game to have better software that then kind of usurp, say, any defensive mechanisms in place. So I think my view is, and the centres would say, embrace AI. It's a fantastic way of innovating businesses, of enabling greater reach, innovation, and all those other things. But be cautious that criminals are also using it as well. But if you get the basics right, and this is the fundamental thing for me, do the basics right, and you will prevent the majority of attacks.
Do you know, you made a very valid point there, actually, Simon, is companies like ourselves, the CRC, Zero, any other MSP or cybersecurity provider out there, we're never ahead of the game itself. We're always playing catch up to the cyber criminals, and we can only do our best efforts to prevent them from carrying out what they want to carry out. So with that in mind, I think it's always a case of constantly being aware, constantly updating yourselves, and just making sure that you and your staff are aware of what's going on in the digital world today. Because that's one of the biggest issues out there, is people just are not aware, are not privileged to know about the next virus coming out, or how a phishing email looks, for example. So I think it's the point of us playing catch up really should resonate with the SMEs. If we're playing catch up, what should they be doing?
Yeah,
So
and I just on that, I mean, I again go back to that point about foundations or building blocks of a business. If we take something like health and safety or finance, for example, when we run businesses, we keep ourselves up to date with any changes around health and safety legislation. So we need to make sure we're assessing risks and so on. Any changes in finance rules, accounting rules, etc. We need to make sure we're on top of those to ensure compliance. So we need to have the same approach to cyber. We need to make sure that we're doing exactly the same things and keeping ourselves abreast of what's happening out there as we do in any other type of risk. And I think that's the key thing. Let's not see cyber as something completely separate. This is part of your overall risk management regime. It's the same way you'd probably deal with an electrical outage or a flood or any of those types of issues. Cyber should be on the risk register as well. And for too many businesses, it simply isn't there.
I'm just wondering, Simon, with that, I mean, you mentioned a lot of businesses out there at the moment are micro businesses. They could be 1 to 5 members of staff turning over less than so much a year, for example. How would we work out whether implementing cyber essentials or some additional cyber resiliency is applicable for those businesses? Because, for example, you don't know if one of those 80% in the micro businesses are literally one man bin men with social media accounts who run their entire business through Facebook Messenger, for example, which we've all seen them happening, and they're quite successful little businesses, I have to say. How would we implement that one standard, that one size fits all to a one-man band like that against a 250-man SME, for example, 249-man SME?
Yeah, so it's a really good question, probably quite a complex one to answer in many ways. I mean, there's a few things I'd say. So first of all, you're absolutely right. When we look at most businesses out there, I think what we currently have is people see cybersecurity, cyber resilience as a cost to their business as opposed to an investment. And I think that's a real challenge, first of all. And I'll use an example of Mrs. Miggins' pie shop. So Mrs. Miggins has a lovely shop that makes wonderful pies. She may have a few staff, perhaps some part-time staff, for example. For her, cybersecurity is a cost. She doesn't understand necessarily why she needs to invest in systems or software that helps protect her business. But increasingly, to attract new customers, maybe she's got a new website that she wants to be able to sell goods on. She recognises that she needs to do it. So she still doesn't necessarily understand the rationale behind it. So I think, on the one hand, what we need to be much better at is the benefits of good cyber. So there's loads of stuff out there which says, these are the risks, and this is what's going to happen if you're hit by a cyber attack. But people stick their head in the sands when they hear that because they don't want to hear bad news. What we need to do is be much better at the messaging around these are the real tangible benefits. So cybersecurity can help you, and cyber resilience and cyber essentials by default of that can help you, for example, innovate, can help you expand your business, helps demonstrate to customers that you take your security and their security of their data very seriously. It can help you win new contracts, new customers, and so on. And I think if we have some good case studies around that come from businesses, that's probably the strongest thing that we can do to change behavior around improving resilience overall. The other thing I was going to say is, in terms of, you made the point there about a micro businesses will be very different to a business that's perhaps got 250 staff. I think we have to look at it from a risk perspective, and sometimes you might say, well, a one-man business, yes, that looks like it has a very low risk, but if they work in the financial services sector, for example, and perhaps they're doing trading from their bedroom, then they're dealing with tens of millions of pounds, if not more, and so the risk is very high compared to perhaps Mrs. Miggins, who's now got a chain of stores and she's got 200 staff, but still a relatively low turnover. So we need to look at it about a risk perspective, and we need to understand the kind of data that those people hold and the risk of that getting outside. So I think a more general risk approach, rather than looking at it as a size of organisation, is the right thing to do. And then perhaps the more controversial thing to add in there, we were talking about this before the webinar today, was kind of the levers that are available to government. So at the moment, Cyber Essentials is a voluntary scheme, and there are 2 levels, of course. We've got basic Cyber Essentials, which cost between £300 to £500, depending on the size of your organisation. It's an annual self-assessment that can be carried out by the verification body. And on the other hand, you've then got Cyber Essentials Plus, which requires a technical verification as well. Now, as I said, it's voluntary. We're starting to see people require Cyber Essentials as a prerequisite now. So in the public sector, for example, if you're bidding for contracts, you are expected to have Cyber Essentials as an absolute minimum before you're able to submit tender documents. There's questions now. Do we start looking at mandating that for every organisation across the country? If so, how do we implement that? And you mentioned implementation. I think that's a real difficult thing to ensure compliance. But that is starting to look at I guess, how do we solve this big problem? And as we said earlier on, the figures out there at the moment show that we are not making a dent on the threats or the number of victims that are being hit by cybercrime. So my argument on that, and I say this individually rather than on behalf of the centres, government probably has to start looking at some stronger levers to try and improve the state of the nation in relation to cyber.
I agree there, Simon. And and like we said before, it's one of those things that always goes amiss in business plans unless it's mentioned or you become a victim of a cyber attack. And then you think, wow, we need to do something about this, which often, and I'm sure you'd agree, is probably too late when you've already been hit by ransomware. So obviously one of the things I wanted to touch on, there's a lot of people out there which are all discussing, let's do cyber essentials, let's see what it's all about, what can you give our business? But from what I know, it's not been very successful over the last 9 or 10 or so years that it's been kickstarted. How can we actually get more businesses being more receptive to the idea of being cyber essential accredited? How can we promote that more? I know you mentioned all these benefits of tenders and stuff like that, but I think it's how do we make people more aware of what's happening in the world today? Because I think this is the biggest thing. If you make people aware of what's happening, of the damage it can cause from cyber attack, surely we can push this initiative forward a bit more as organizations and get it into more people's hands. But how could we do that? What sort of things could we change? What could the government change in terms of the accreditation itself to make it more palatable for these smaller organizations to uptake, for example?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, you mentioned that, Cyber Essentials was introduced back in 2014. I think just looking at my stats, I think in that time, there's been around 120,000 certificates awarded to businesses who have successfully achieved Cyber Essentials. So, when we look at 5.5 million businesses, that's still a very tiny drop in the ocean that's out there. I think there's a few things. And I mentioned earlier about this idea of government perhaps legislating to ensure that every business of a certain size or risk profile has that minimum standard in place. I think the other way of looking at it, if we look at sort of more of the nudge theory approach, is maybe we create more informed customers. So what we do is we hope that people, or individuals and organizations start asking questions about people they're going to go into business with, even employees going into new organizations. What steps do you take to ensure the safety and security of the data that you've got here, both of myself as perhaps a member of staff or as customers that we work with? Again, this week we've had a really high profile supply chain cyber attack with some ransomware against a company that manages payroll for some of the UK's largest firms. And again, that's understandably causing quite a bit of concern. So I'd like to see perhaps a more informed customer who asks those questions to say, yeah, just exactly what do you do? And Cyber Essentials is one of those ways of demonstrating that you take that security seriously. So I think it works both ways. Government has a role promoting the benefits, making the scheme relevant, and it does update Cyber Essentials regularly as well. So it's been updated in light of the pandemic, where there's more home working and hybrid working now. So it's evolving, which I think is also fantastic. But also looking at other things that it can do as well about promoting good cybersecurity practice and informing people, both employees, individuals, other businesses, of why these things need to be in place. So I don't think, again, it's a one-size-fits-all approach, but I do think it's a combination of things that we need to do together.
It is, and I think to kind of help that awareness campaign, I think what the government also needs to do, because like you said, we've seen that major supply chain hit this week from ransomware attack. We've seen Facebook been targeted. We've seen the NHS been targeted. We've seen all these major enterprises get targeted with ransomware attack, which is shown in the news, in articles online. But we never see them smaller organisations, a little news column saying SME been struck with cyber attack.
Absolutely.
And I think this puts the thought process in the back of people's minds of, well, we're not Facebook, we're not the NHS, we're not a huge enterprise level business, and therefore it will never happen to us. Where the fact of the matter is, it's the opposite. It's more likely to happen to these because cyber criminals understand that they've got less resiliency, less solutions in place to stop ransomware working itself, through the system to the backups and so on. And would you agree with the point that we need to make it more of a mainstream attacks rather than just critical enterprise level businesses? I mean, it's all well and good knowing that NHS has been struck by cyber attack, but then it's not helping the argument that all SMEs also need to undertake the kind of same resiliency, the same levels of resiliency against these cyber threats. Would you say we need to bump it up a little bit when it comes to the SME market and what's actually happening in the SME world?
Yeah, I think it's a really great point, Jamie. And you're absolutely right. You know, businesses will look at the attacks of this week and go, well, that's a global organisation. I only employ one or two staff. It's not going to happen to me, so I'm not going to even bother reading this because it's not relevant. So I think some examples of SMEs would be really helpful. But what I want to see is the positive side as well. I want to see the success stories where SMEs have said, you know what, we didn't really think about cyber, but we decided that we'd take an interest in it. This is what we've done, and actually these are the things that have helped us as a result of that, and we can now use this as a way of developing our business, growing. And I always say this, and I say this in a jokey way when I do events. You know, if I was to run an event that talks about cybersecurity, I have a handful of people who turn up, and typically they're people who already know something about cyber or sadly have become a victim. If I was to advertise an event that says how to make £1 million out of Facebook, I'd have people queuing out the door. Now, I'm not saying that's what we need to do, but we need to change the narrative around looking at it from a fear to one that can actually help grow your business. So people see, and this is that behavior change, see cyber as a way of innovation, of growing their businesses. So I think that's one thing. And I'd like to see more of the way of success stories from an SME perspective. I think the other angle of this, which is probably a bit more controversial, we've talked about sort of government efforts on this as well, and the levers around it. But, you know, let's have a look at try and demystifying some of the language that's used in cyber as well. You know, things like ransomware, malware, phishing. I mean, we understand what they mean because we work in the industry. But again, going back to Mrs. Miggins and her pie shop, it's a foreign language. So let's try and demystify some of those terms in language that people understand. And I think then you'll find people going, oh yeah, I get it now. I understand it. And the final thing I'd say on this, and this is another thing I think we struggle with sometimes, if we try and talk about physical crime. So let's think about as a business, you have a physical premise, maybe it's burgled. Let's say your car is broken into, your home is attacked or whatever, or you as an individual perhaps beaten up on the street. You can see the physical consequences of those types of crimes. With cyber, it's really hard to articulate what a crime looks like because you can't actually physically see it. So we need to be better at the language that we use around cyber and try and relate it more to things that people understand. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done. There's a lot of work that's going on and looking into that, but we're still a long way off.
To be honest, you made a very valid point there. Is when I speak to my customers who are not tech minded, who don't know terminology as well as what we do. When you talk about cyber essentials and going through the accreditation to help stop phishing emails, to help identify what they look like, how ransomware looks like, etc., they often go, well, I don't know what you mean. And I think it is making it clearer for people. So when I translate that into, look, it's like having an insurance package for your car. You know, yes. You're not going to go out into the street without insurance, because if you do and you suffer, you're going to end up with no end of damages. So it's very much like having that. It's very much similar to having an alarm system on your building. If a physical burglar is trying to get into your office, then an alarm's going to go off. It's going to deter that burglar from entering. Exactly. And I think that is the biggest thing here is it's that awareness piece of what it can stop, how it can protect you, but also what it can do in terms of benefits and what it can give you as well. So no, to be honest with you, I mean, I'd really like to see more SMEs in the market looking at cyber essentials, even if they're looking just to go through the basics as a checkbox exercise to say we are operating in the right way, we're on track, we need to keep moving in this direction. So I mean, and we're coming up to the Q&A time, but any few final points from yourself in terms of cyber essentials? Or
the one thing I perhaps just wanted was a few other things. So first of all, just on the cost front. So I think it's worth just pointing out the cost of basic cyber essentials. So it starts at £300 for a micro business, and it is up to £500 for a larger organisation. If you need more assistance and support from a certification body, then there may well be additional costs on top of that. So it's not a hugely expensive thing to go through. In fact, the Cyber Resilience Centre for London has got additional funding from the Mayor's Office, so we're offering a discount off the basic cyber essentials scheme. So if you're in London, an SME, and want to take part of that, we're happy to contribute up to £100 off that fee, which may be of help. What also the government have done recently is introduce the cyber advisor scheme. So there are a handful of advisors who are out there, and their job is specifically to help small and medium-sized businesses get ready for cyber essentials. So that that's some assistance that's offered by some government accredited individuals, and we're really lucky to work with one in the CRC for London as well. So that's a new concept that's been recently launched, and I think that will help as well. And also on the NCSC website, there are some fantastic resources around Cyber Essentials. So you can do it. It's a self-assessment form for the basic Cyber Essentials. You can do it yourself. You can obviously then get some support in if you need it. But there's also a readiness toolkit. So there's lots of tools there to help you prepare for Cyber Essentials if you do need it. And I think that's the key thing. You know, education is really important. Using the tools that are available out there, and hopefully we'll see more businesses get Cyber Essentials and demonstrate that they are cyber secure.
Fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Simon. So guys, we've reached the Q&A stage of the conversation today. So if any of you attendees has any questions for myself or Simon in regards to Cyber Essentials, how it can protect your businesses, or even just any questions on the cyber advisory that we can answer for you now, please put them in the chat and we'll answer your question straight away. So, but no, Simon, it's been amazing actually, you know, speaking with you while we're waiting for the questions to come through. Personally, myself, I mean, I've been in IT now for almost as long. Just over the amount of time that Cyber Essentials has been going. So 2013, my career started. So obviously, I've been privy to this when it actually came out in 2014. Very good initiative, and it's nice to see that changes are being made and it's being as agile as what businesses are, because that was one of my concerns over the years, is how can Cyber Essentials be agile and evolve as businesses evolve, and you know, obviously technology evolves with that as well. But as well as technology evolving, cyber criminals, their thought process and how they're attacking is also evolving. So we have a question come from Chris. Chris has asked, how much more difficult is it to get CES Plus compared to basic Cyber Essentials?
Yeah, so I suppose the answer to that is it depends. So the differences between the two is there's still an assessment process, but with Cyber Essentials Plus, it's done by an independent individual. So they come in and do a technical assessment. So whereas Cyber Essentials Basic is effectively self-assessment, Cyber Essentials Plus is one that requires a specialist to come on board and do. So the cost of that, it varies. Again, each Cyber Essentials certification body will have a cost structure. So if you are speaking to a certification body, ask for that up front and maybe get some quotes from a number of them before you proceed. They're all trained to the same standard. They're independently monitored as well through IASME, but there is a difference between the two, and obviously a cost element to that as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Simon. Just to add on to that point as well, if you do partner with an MSP or, you know, someone like ourselves at Zero, they can probably help you with the preparation for Cyber Essentials, as well as any remediation work that needs to take place to gain the plus version of that accreditation. So we have another question, Simon, from Jano. How long does it take a business to obtain Cyber Essentials on average, and how often does it need to be renewed?
Yeah, so it's another one of those it depends answers, isn't it, Jamie? Basic Cyber Essentials, if you know what you're doing and you're reasonably competent around IT, you can actually do it in a few hours. So it's relatively straightforward. Again, if you're coming at it from the perspective of no experience, then that can take a bit of time, and particularly if you need external help to do that. And one of the things, if you are bringing in someone external, they will want to look at what you've got in place already, and they'll use that against the self-assessment questionnaire. I think someone just put in the chat there, you can actually download the self-assessment questionnaire, so you can actually see what questions you've got to answer, so you can do some preparatory work around that before the assessment itself. I think the other question was around the validity. How long is it valid for? So it is valid for 12 months, just like your MOT certificate, so you have to renew it every 12 months. And in fact, what IASME do is they keep a database of all organisations who have current or valid certifications. So if you're a larger organisation and you want to see if your suppliers have got Cyber Essentials, you simply go to the IASME website and then you can search against a specific organisation to see whether they've got it or not and when it was awarded. So that's also what happens. You get your name listed on that company, and of course you get to use the logo as well, which is great. So you can use that on your website and marketing material as well.
Fantastic. A quick question from myself, Simon. So the Cyber Essentials Basics accreditation, you can fill out that form yourself, based on what you operate. You send it off, and as far as I'm aware, only limited forms are checked, and you get the accreditation. Now, the question I have here is, how do Cyber Essentials, IASME, or the CRC protect themselves from a customer filling out this form saying we are adhering to everything that's been said, to be given back just for that to be untrue? How do you kind of overcome that, or how do IASME overcome such things? And on the back of that, are any Cyber Essentials basic accreditations or forms submitted audited prior to giving the accreditation itself?
Yeah, so probably the best answer is from IASME on this one. But as I understand it, there is an audit process. They will check to make sure that things are being done appropriately. But you're right. Any certification scheme is always open to potential, people looking at short ways around it. And that is one of the challenges with any form of self-assessment schemes that you've got, whether it's for cyber or something else. But I know IASME do take that very seriously. The credibility of the scheme is reliant on people applying and sending in their application forms honestly, and ultimately at the end of the day, if you were to say that you've got Cyber Essentials, you suffer a breach or an attack, and it was proven that you hadn't got one of those basic controls, then it would probably have a more detrimental impact on that organization, because it looks like they're not trustworthy. So it is done independently, but certainly probably refer to IASME in terms of how that process actually works.
Perfect. And are you aware of any companies which have lost their Cyber Essentials accreditation through, misdemeanor, through not being true on the form that they filled out, or maybe, for example, gaining a Cyber Essentials Plus accreditation in what we are now, June, and coming up to December, 6 months prior to the renewal, massively changing your infrastructure or your back end softwares, whatever it may be? How is that enforceable? How do we keep a check on these companies where they have made a massive change, whether that accreditation is still valid, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't know is my honest answer. I mean, my guess would be that there is an onus on the organisation who's been certificated to actually update the accreditation body if there have been any major changes like you described there, and then there may be a need to review whether that certificate is still valid or not. But again, these are types of things that IASME probably best to answer on that behalf, because it ultimately comes back down to the governance and credibility of the scheme itself.
Fantastic. So I'm just going to ask any more questions for Simon. We're coming up to the end of today's conversation, so if there's any final questions, please do put them in the chat and I'll ask on your behalf. But yeah, Simon, I mean, overall, I think there's a lot of things we could take away from today's call, even if it's just thought process and maybe awareness on getting people to think about, are we safe? Are we safe when we operate online? Are we safe just as a business in general when it comes to cyber resiliency? So I'm hoping there's a couple of SMEs out there who's attending the call today is going to go away and do some thinking. We've got somebody typing in the chat, so we'll wait a few more seconds, Simon, and we've got another question coming
before
through.
I wait there, Jamie. One thing I was saying, thank you for the opportunity to talk today. I mean, really enjoyable, Jamie, and we big admirers of Zero and the work you do supporting SMEs across the country. I mean,
likewise, Simon.
The one thing I would say, and I keep bleating on about this all the time, but one of the things that we just don't see enough are people getting the basics right. So these are the really simple things of which Cyber Essentials highlights, but it's things like two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, updating software regularly, having a robust password policy. Those really simple things that really don't cost any money at all, but can make such a difference to basic cyber hygiene. So get those basics right is the first and foremost thing that any organisation to do, and then it's about how do you then build on additional layers of security that keeps you more resilient against more sophisticated threats. But we're just not seeing enough at the bottom end at the moment of that basic stuff.
Fantastic, thank you, Simon. And likewise, we're massive admirers of what you're doing in the CRC. What you're doing for businesses in the SME market is absolutely fantastic. You're helping people against Cyber Essentials. You're helping them towards the kind of basics, like we said, the basics of what should be carried out. And you are right, Simon, that the very smallest of changes out there that's made can make the biggest of difference. So, for example, what we do for any new starter that joins in our organization is we run in your induction process cybersecurity training, just staff awareness, what to look out for. And we think, that took maybe 15 minutes of my time to run that when I first joined Zero back in the day. And it's actually protected the company from 3 or 4 different clicks that I could have clicked onto an email. Luckily I've worked in the sector for a number of years now, so I'm not that foolish. But you kind of do think, if you take on a junior member of staff, first job, never been aware to the cyber realm at all in the past, and they get an email from their managing director saying, please click this attached invoice and process. Before you know it, they've locked the entire system out. So 15 minutes worth of training when they start, in comparison to nothing, and let them crack on, and the damage that could have is detrimental. We have a question from Steve Collins. So Steve just put, support companies are offering packages at circa £50 per month. Where is the value in these companies? Good question, because I haven't come across anybody offering a support for £50 a month on Cyber Essentials. So I would always question that, Steve, from me. But over to you, Simon, for your answer.
Yeah, again, I don't know without getting into specifics. I mean, some companies you can see will offer a basic support package or a cybersecurity package. I mean, I think one of the things we are trying to do in the centre, again, I go back to this point about informed customers, is actually giving you the tools to be able to have those conversations with companies offering services like that. And this is one of the difficulties we have. When we speak to companies and they say, where do we go for cyber security help? It's very difficult for the centres to recommend specific organisations. So quite often they'll rely on Google, and they may come across on Google an offer that says just £50 a month and we'll look after your entire cybersecurity needs, and that's it. Someone thinks, fantastic, that solves my problem. But what are they actually getting? What are they asking for? And what does that actually deliver? So we're trying to help those businesses with a set of questions, and also the answers to those questions that they should expect to hear from companies that are offering those types of packages. Because sadly there are some companies out there who just use technical language as a way of trying to exploit some nervousness in the SME space, and hopefully that will help us differentiate between the companies that offer some fantastic services and support and others who are not really geared to supporting those customers.
Thank you, Simon. Steve, just a point from myself as well on that there. You may want to do a bit more research into these organisations, and also look at any other testimonies, referrals from their customers. To be honest with you, if this £50 per month is to keep you aligned to the Cyber Essentials Basics accreditation or best practice, if they were a worthy MSP, reputable MSP, should we say, they should keep you truly aligned to that during the course of their relationship anyway, because that's what they're there for. They should do it as part of the service delivery or the contract that you're in for IT support, because it is best practice to keep you up to date, to keep you alert of all the things happening, and protecting your business. That's what an IT support provider is there for. So definitely have a look at what that offer gives you furthermore. Do a bit of research into testimonies, referrals, any kind of physical reviews that you've seen online. But if you are looking at an MSP, I would say have a look at one that will keep you aligned at all times, has the basic policies and practices in place where they're never going to let their customers operate outside of compliancy. So that's my answer. Garrett, when is the next webinar? So Garrett, the next webinar is going to be taking place on the 28th of June at 10 a.m. And the topic of the webinar is increased business productivity with Microsoft 365 automation. So a very interesting topic. Simon, maybe something that we could get you involved in the future is how CRC can assist in gaining the Cyber Essentials accreditation within the Microsoft 365 stack. So, but no, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the call today. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'll definitely get on the case, and we'll jump on a quick beer sometime at a pub, and we'll have a good chat. So especially since the sun's coming out now, Simon. So, but no, guys, thank you ever so much for joining the call today. It's been a pleasure seeing you all in the call again. Jacob, you're more than welcome. Not a problem at all. We look forward to seeing you next month. If you have any additional questions on Cyber Essentials or anything specific for Simon that you haven't asked in the chat, I'm going to put my email address in the chat for you now. You're more than welcome to send me a quick line across, and then I'll forward that across to Simon. Simon, if you want to share your email address with the attendees, you're definitely more than welcome, unless you want the communication to come through me, and then we can organise the conversations from there. But no, for now, thank you ever so much, guys. Simon, thank you ever so much again. Good to see you, and we'll definitely catch up soon.
Thanks, Jamie.
Thank you all. Have a good day.